I'm Steve Weiner, Microsoft Intune MVP, and I got to catch up with John Jarvis, who is also a Microsoft MVP, and we're out here at the Microsoft MVP Summit, and we were able to sit down and chat a little bit about how MSPs are managing Intune, Entra, Microsoft 365. So, John, why don't you tell me a little bit about how your company manages customers as an MSP? What are your biggest challenges?
So as an MSP business, the scale of the devices that we are having to manage on a day-to-day basis, proactively and reactively, is quite large. We've got lots of customers, thousands of devices, and lots of different Microsoft Intune tenants to manage. So, it's quite tough now. And luckily we've got tools in place where we can actually manage them.
Excellent. Yeah, I would think, generally when I talk to MSPs, the challenge is always really the amount of time in a day, right? Because, being proactive, architecting solutions, making sure you're deploying policies to keep things compliant. I mean, you're always up against the clock. Because you're also, I'm assuming, keeping the devices online and answering tickets is a big part of the job.
I mean, that's a key part of the job, but
yeah.
For an MSP now, it's about the whole device life cycle. So it's onboarding their Intune tenant, making sure that the right configuration is there, making sure that devices are secure as a first, and as you said, the continuous monitoring, the being proactive with devices, and then also end of life on devices and how they manage that as well.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned configuration. One thing I often hear from MSPs is the challenge of keeping the tenants consistent, right? And this becomes a problem, especially when the customers sometimes have access to the tenant, or even within the MSP. You have different folks making different changes. One, deploying the right configuration, and two, making sure it stays that way. Right? And I hear often that that's a challenge, right? I don't know if that's something, do you find that amongst the tenants?
So hopefully in my organisation we have nobody on the help desk that changes policies, but it can happen, and customers sometimes like to get a little bit hands-on, and policies that we've intentionally set out and agreed with the customer, sometimes there is drift.
Right. Yeah, there is, and a lot of the times we don't know until it's too late, right? Which is why now, we took a look at with Tenant Manager, right? The drift, you could see that, right? The drift monitoring is for every tenant, right? So I guess from your standpoint, the ability to monitor drift, not just on one tenant, but multiple tenants from the master config. I mean, what does that do for you as an MSP?
Well, it gives you that one snapshot look at my whole, what we're responsible for. Instead of having to go different locations and looking at multiple different areas, having that one snapshot and understanding drift across multiple organisations, as you said, it becomes really quick, really easy for our admin to be able to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes one of those things where if you're not monitoring it, you're always trying to stay ahead of it. And it's really impossible because, like I always say, and I'm sure you would agree, you have better things to do, honestly, throughout the day. That brings up another point. We talk about like deployment. I'm sure you have, you run across organizations with different levels of compliance. So to make sure you're always deploying that, people miss things, right? Sometimes manually. So how have you found with Tenant Manager the ability to just pick a compliance, whether it's CIS L1, L2, whether it's Essential 8, right? Whether it's from another tenant. How are you finding that with Tenant Manager, the fact that it's a one-click deploy?
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome because I don't know, you definitely have, but a lot of people try to implement like SIS baselines and fail spectacularly.
Correct. I have, yes.
Yep. So have I. But it's sometimes a very hard thing to do, especially if you're going. If back in the day when you just had the PDF and you was going through the PDF and making sure that everything was. So it's tough. This makes it so much easier. Makes it a lot easier to manage as an MSP business. So something that you said earlier about compliance is that with Tenant Manager, you're able to do a backup as config, right?
Yeah.
It's config as backup, sorry.
Yeah.
Which is really important. I think there's a lot of banks in Europe that actually require config as a backed up, and not just backups of data, which we're used to.
Yeah, what I've found since working with MSPs is that even enterprises too sometimes, but when especially MSPs, no one's really backing up the configs, right? And when we talk about backup, I always hear about, well, we have OneDrive for data, or we have a third-party solution, or disaster recovery and that's all good, and we need that. But when we really talk about Intune, and even some of the entry things, conditional access, things like that, no one's backing them up. And we think about that, and what would happen, if, because I know we were talking about an incident before, we were talking about a customer who, I guess the organization made some changes, and of course it broke, and they call up saying, how do we go back, right? And there's really no good answer if you don't have a backup, right?
No, I mean, and that solves it in a click, right?
The ability now you have is, go back to the previous day, the previous week, whenever that configuration was working, you don't have to panic anymore. And I think that's something a lot of MSPs will relate to.
Yeah, I mean, that also gives the peace of mind to the customers as well, which is a massive thing for MSP. That is a massive value add for MSP to be able to have, is giving that peace of mind to the customer that back the config goes back to normal. If there's any changes that have been made, everything goes back to how it should be, and that doesn't drift whatsoever.
Right. Well, and that's a nice thing, right? Between having the backups, right, having drift management, knowing you're deploying from a well-known baseline, whether you made it, whether it's one of the several that comes with Tenant Manager, it's just going to leave your team with so much more time for the things that they need to do, which is making sure the customer's productive, the machines are working the way they should. So yeah, I don't think we've seen something like this built for Intune before, which is, I think, great.
And I think kind of what you said there, Tenant Manager is built for Intune by people that love Intune. So
yeah,
what better tool to have, right?
I think it's great, and for me, it's been a game changer. John, thanks so much for sitting down with me out here at the summit. You having a good time at the summit?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, great to be here.
It's always awesome. All right, we'll be seeing you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Dean Ellerby, and I'm joined by Andrew Taylor, Microsoft MVP, Harjit Dhaliwal, Microsoft MVP, Nicklas, Olsen, Microsoft MVP, and Steve Weiner, also Microsoft MVP. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That went well. We'll start the show with something a little unusual for a corporate webinar, but we are Software Central, so this should be interesting. A quick note before we kick off. If you are watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, drop your questions in the chat as we go. We've got the team monitoring and we will get back to you. So our first round is, if this is the answer, what is the question? We'll put the answer on screen. It could be a number, a name, anything. And the panel has to come up with something that the question might have been. The funnier, the better, everyone. All right, everyone. We need to pick a category. So, Steve, you're up first. Pick a category.
Yeah, I'm going to pick AI.
Okay, so the answer is 16%. What is the
Oh,
question?
so it's, okay, it's like Jeopardy. I get you. Yeah, 16% is, I would say, the amount of actual cold brew that Duncan puts in after the ice, oat milk, and sugar are in there. That's the amount of the cup you get for cold brew coffee. And they use AI for it. I forgot AI was a category, but I order on the app, and they got to use AI. Everyone's using AI.
I don't think it matters. I was just thinking 16% is actually quite a lot of cold brew, to be honest.
Yeah, it depends on the Dunkin' Donuts that you go into. Starbucks is giving you less, right? And then that's why I do Dunkin'.
That's fair. All right, so 16% was the answer. The question was, what percentage of data breaches involved attackers using AI in 2025? Actually, that's pretty low from what I would have said. Attackers using AI, they should just use it more. I mean, everyone should use AI more. Why aren't the attackers using it more? If I was an attacker, I'd definitely be using ChatGPT.
Imagine how many more licenses they could sell if they realize that.
That was my second guess, just so you know. I was about, before the coffee thing, I was going to say AI breaches. So I do want you to know that if we're counting for prizes on the side. Okay.
Yeah, we are. There are prizes. I'm not sure what they are yet, but we are. Andrew, pick a category.
End users.
All right, so the category is end users. The answer is 170. What's the question?
How many times that annoying user rings you each week?
That's a lot in a week. Yeah. All right, so the answer is 170. What is the question? Steve.
The amount of attempts that most people fight Melania in Elden Ring. But I'm going to tell you right now, I did. All right, 3 tries. That's a faith strength build. All right, so how many times most people do it? That's 170. Me, 3 or 4.
Gaming tips here
3 or
from
4.
Steve.
That is fair. Thank you. Nicklas, the answer is 170. What is the question?
The amount of times the end user said they tried to do something before calling help desk.
And the actual times is 1. Yeah, very good. All right, so the answer was 170. The question was, how many passwords does the average person manage?
I just manage 1.
I mean, yeah, it's just 1, isn't it?
Across
just have the
everything.
1 password that you
just
increment.
1.
Exactly, you increment
Let's
it every
see
month.
how many we got here. Third
170
notebook.
seems to be a lot, though, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And if you use the same word in the security questions as well, you don't even have to remember your mother's maiden name or anything.
That's true.
You just keep adding numbers to your password.
Yeah,
Or
just
exclamation
increment it
marks.
every month. Yeah. All right, so Harjit, you're up. You need to choose a category.
All right, let's do tickets.
All right, so the category is tickets. The answer is Monday morning. What is the question?
On tickets, Monday morning is about the time where you decide you don't want to work in IT anymore.
Is that a question? Sound like an answer.
I think it's the cleanest underwear Steve will wear for the rest of the week.
That's a good point.
They're all clean. They get thrown out after each wear.
Sorry, just to be clear there, Steve, you have single-use underwear.
When I travel, I have single-use underwear.
He really does as well.
Understood. Fantastic. All right. So the next question in the tickets category is, well, the next answer in the tickets category is 32 days. What is the question? Anyone?
How many days are in the month of February on a leap year? I went to school. You can't BS me on this one.
No, you're right. It is absolutely.
Did you ask ChatGPT that answer?
Yeah, I mean, how long is a month on an AI calendar? Is probably a good answer. A good question, obviously. All right, so the answer was 32 days. The question was, what is the median time to fully remediate a vulnerability on an edge device? Isn't that incredible? 32 days.
That's a long time.
Wow.
So if you're a hacker and you're listening, that's 32. I mean, you could take PTO between hacking. You could take the family on leave. You got time. You're good. I wish I had 32 days to complete a task. That's amazing.
Nicklas, over to you. Pick a category.
Cybersecurity.
And the category is cybersecurity. The answer is 30%. What is the question?
The amount of interest the leadership has in IT.
That is unfortunately true. Not a lot of people seem to care about how IT works, or certainly cybersecurity, until something goes wrong. That sucks. Good. Any other questions?
When I used to go grocery shopping, how much time in the store did I spend angry at the other customers as opposed to collecting the items I needed?
That's a low number, Steve. Mine would be easily 70%. Easily.
Well, that's just being angry, not acting on it.
Okay.
30%
How
warm
much?
up.
30% is how much usable content you're going to get from this.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so the answer was 30%. The question was, what percentage of breaches in 2025 involved a third party or supply chain? I think that's gone up recently.
I think that's gone up a lot.
Okay, Andrew, over to you. Choose a category.
Can I have Microsoft, please?
Of course you can. So the answer is 3. What is the question?
Days since it was last DNS.
Nice. It's
Good
very
one.
true. It's. I'd like to say it was funny, but it actually, unfortunately, is true in most cases. Anyone else?
How many times I've used this? How many times I've used this barcode scanner since I got it? It's a barcode scanner for, like UPC code, but it doesn't. It's not connected to anything. So I've used it 3 times, Dean.
You've used it 3 times with it not connected to anything. How did
Correct.
those 3 times go?
No, it's not working.
It was just
Right.
shooting it like a laser gun.
Yeah. Okay, so the answer was 3. The question was, how many different names has Azure Active Directory had since it launched? So, Nicklas, you're up. Choose a category.
The cloud.
The cloud. Okay, so the question is... Nope. Okay, so the answer is 90%. What is the question?
The percentage of organizations that need on-prem device join. I mean, if you have them, of course.
Yep. Unfortunately, hybrid join is a necessity across all organizations, isn't it? That's 100, almost 100%. I'd say 90% was definitely needed. Okay, so the question, no. Okay, so the answer was 90%. The question really was, what percentage of organizations will have adopted hybrid cloud by 2027? Okay.
That seems reasonable enough if it's a
It
hybrid
does.
cloud.
It does. I mean, the good thing is that you're moving to the cloud, I guess, but and staying on-prem
The
a little
bad
bit.
thing is that
but
because of AI, there's no compute in any of your data centers.
that is true.
Okay.
And you can't buy RAM anymore.
Or SSDs. Yeah.
Can't buy RAM.
All
I
right.
bought all the RAM already.
Did you? What are
I
you
have
using your RAM for?
Don't worry about it. I have it.
All right.
See, I got
Oh, look
Got
at
RAM.
Mr. Big Bucks there.
just I
Nice.
bought all the RAM ahead of time instead of Bitcoin. I knew what was going on. So I bought the RAM.
All right. So now we've warmed up and proven that most of us really shouldn't give up the day job to do comedy instead. Let's be honest about why we're actually here. So the day-to-day looks not great for MSPs managing Intune across multiple customers. If you're on this webinar, you probably understand that. First up, the number of tenants you need to manage. Every customer is its own environment. Everyone needs policies, configuration baselines, security baselines. When Microsoft rolls out something new, which is a lot, then you're going to have to do that work per tenant manually. So copying, pasting, changing things, repeat. Across 10, 20, 50 customers, I really don't see how you can possibly scale that. And the risk of inconsistency when you do that is going to be massive.
And also keep in mind you've got 10, 20, 50 tenants, and you've got, say, 10 staff managing at 50 tenants. That is 500 user accounts you have to manage across all of the tenants. And that's quite a breach waiting to happen there.
It is. And I guess we've already perhaps seen the impact of that recently with the Striker incident. And talking about that, that's the security piece is obviously very important, and attacks are increasing. And every week there's a new headline. And the reality is most MSPs just don't have time to review every customer environment as they should. And you know that you need to harden configurations and enable security features and tighten stuff up. But when you're firefighting across tenants, the proactive stuff just kind of slips off your radar. And that's not me being mean, that's just the reality of the workload.
Yep,
Any thoughts?
absolutely. Yeah,
Anyone
I
want to
mean,
jump
if
in?
you're managing 50 tenants, MSPs are doing everything for those tenants. They've got calls coming for replacement keyboards. They've got people who can't access websites, and they don't have time to do the more exciting proactive stuff. They're just busy putting out fires all day, every day.
I spent the last year going from advising and consulting individual enterprises in Intune to helping many MSPs. And yeah, I would say time is the biggest factor, right? Going into Intune is sometimes not an option at all. So anything to help them stay out of that, but keep everything secure is essentially the top priority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so backup. This one's interesting because it's increasingly a requirement for cyber insurance. You need to be able to prove that your configurations in general are backed up, and that includes Intune. We need to make sure it's backed up and recoverable. But how many of us actually do that consistently across every tenant? It's typically a manual job, and just things get missed. If a tenant gets compromised or someone makes a bad change, what will you actually do to recover?
The other thing I'd add is backup should be offsite and immutable. There's no point backing up with a script in your tenant and dumping it in your tenant, because if you get breached, they just delete the backups as well as the tenant.
The biggest issue with backups for Intune admins or people, if you're a Microsoft admin doing that, is there is an inherent skill set that is required to do it yourself that I think a lot of admins don't natively have, or it's not a bad thing, it's just not their world. I'm always talking about how people feel like the graph and coding was thrust upon them by moving to Intune. So now to make not only get the data, right, to go in and know where to back up a config profile, your settings, but to automate that yourself and take that on as a task, I think that is something you're going to see a lot of organizations who move to Intune just don't. I would say over 90% don't have backups. And
Yeah.
sure you
Backup's the
agree with
easy
that.
bit as well. It's getting it back restored. There's a lot
Restoring too, but yeah, not even having
Yeah.
the backup, you have no chance to restore. So
Yeah, what
I
about
think the
testing
problem
the backups?
Yeah.
that too. Yeah,
Because some agents do backups. You remember back in the day when we used to do those tape backups for your servers and things like that, and you collect hundreds and hundreds of tapes, but you never really test it when
hmm
could you recover from it?
yeah.
And doing that at scale across multiple tenants obviously is it's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of work.
And as an MSP, your customers are probably expecting you to do it anyway.
Yeah, I guess they're just expecting it's done, not necessarily
Yeah.
caring about how it's done or whether it was successful.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, I thought about application management, because finding install commands, uninstall commands, testing, rolling out, and then doing it all over again every time there's an update is infuriating and really quite sad when you think about having to do that over and over again. And I'm just thinking back to when I was a admin doing that over and over again. I'm feeling a little bit sad actually about that. That's what I used to do. Multiply that by every tenant. It's one of the biggest time sinks in the MSP workflow, surely. I mean, just having to take every application across every tenant, and if there's any slight changes that you've got to make in that application for each of those customers, that's just literally duplicating work. And it's exactly the kind of repetitive work that should be automated, but many times isn't.
And again, if you have to do it manually, you have to check if there's a new version available. And typically for some software, it becomes available quite often. So someone has to keep an eye on that. And people don't really do that.
No, that's true. And keeping that going is something that can easily drop because no one's checking, so no one knows if there's a thing that needs to be done, and it's very easy to drop that particular task and never be told about it, because if Chrome release a new version every week and you only check every month, who really cares apart from when it all goes wrong and you get breached because your Chrome wasn't up to date?
Mm-hmm.
And that's providing that you're browsing the Google site every day to check if there's a new version of Chrome.
Right.
And
Correct.
I mean, who does that? Do people just sit there on the 7-zip site going, refresh, no, refresh, no. Oh, there's a new one. Let's package it. You find
then
out
they
when
have
the
to
0
package it.
days already happened.
Yeah.
You might miss it.
And underlying all of this is just Microsoft themselves. The platform changes constantly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We get new features, we get deprecated features that weren't working, we get renamed parts of the console. The consultants themselves who are working on your customers need to stay current, and that itself takes time that you're not billing the customer for. That surely is just a time sink in itself.
And on the plus side, if you automate it, you can still build them as if you're doing it manually.
Ooh, that's naughty. Do people do that? Do we automate things and then bill for the manual task?
There's one consultant in the room. Steve, do we do that?
No. No, we don't do that. That's because there's, you know what, that's the real differentiating piece of automation, I think, and that all goes back to the people who say Copilot is going to take our jobs. If we're using the automation correctly, it allows us to spend our hours doing more impactful things. So from the consultant perspective, I can get more done. And also, that's when you think about what people want to spend their money on, whether I'm doing it or I'm spending money, I would probably hate to see a bill of like, okay, I spent 18 hours packaging these apps. It's like, oh, I had to pay you because I couldn't do it. But versus, wow, they're really efficient at packaging apps. I only spent 2 hours of my money. So, yeah. But if there's some crappy consultants out there doing that, by all means, continue what you're doing. Right? There's a reason we have Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts.
Or you can do it cheaper, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, quicker and cheaper.
That is true. Okay, I mean that was always a debate in companies I've worked at, where if you put in the time up front to automate it, then you get to bill less hours for the thing you've done. But surely the value of it is still there, so maybe you should be charging more for the hour. Anyway, finally, compliance. So more and more organizations are asking their MSPs to help with regulatory and standards alignment. So CIS, ISO, Cyber Essentials, name your framework. It means you have to gather evidence, produce reports, demonstrate that configurations meet specific benchmarks, and that's all time-consuming when you're doing it manually across individual tenants. Has anyone had to do that in this team? Are you aware of how much effort that would be to meet those different frameworks? Because I mean, I've not really worked with CIS, but Andrew, you must have.
I've done a lot with CIS and ISO and Cyber Essentials, actually. Yes. They're different work streams. So ISO is more looking at the company as a whole. CIS is at the tenant level. You can join CIS and get a copy of their standards, which you can import into your tenant, but they charge a percentage of your company income. So it's quite expensive. Or you could use an ISV who already have access to benchmarks who can deploy them for you. Even if you want to compare to a CIS benchmark, technically you have to be a member to be able to do that. You can download PDFs for free and you can scroll through and check if you've got them, but any sort of automated comparison, which MSPs are going to want, they're not going to want to go through a PDF on every single tenant they onboard and see how it compares. So any of the automated comparison tools technically should be CIS members.
I'm going through it now with folks who were trying to do it manually, and no joke, for a somewhat outdated version, Andrew and I were talking about this for the other day, for an older version of the benchmark, they are literally at, I would say, 11 months of trying to implement that. So doing it manually and this is an enterprise. Now an MSP who has to do this, times 10, 20 more. Yeah, that's got to be really, really difficult and painful. They're probably sad. Probably very sad. So, yeah, I wouldn't do it manually.
It does sound quite
And of
sad.
course, MSPs probably don't get paid till the project's done. So if it takes 11 months, that's a long time without any income.
Correct. Correct.
really sad. I mean, that's a little bit of a downer. I was quite upbeat until that point. Thanks, Steve.
You said you were sad on the app packaging bit.
You're right, but I got a
Yeah.
lot more sad thinking about compliance. So that's the picture, and it's not going to get any simpler, certainly. More tenants, more threats, more compliance requirements, more changes from Microsoft. And the question is, how can MSP stay on top of that? And that's what we're here to talk about.
Yes, so we have built products to help you. That's why we're here. We love MSPs. We've all worked in them, I think, mostly. And we know the pain you're going through. So we have created Tenant Manager, which is now officially a part of the Intune for MSPs program. And it's also part of MISA. And we have built that to help you rapidly onboard and monitor and back up and do all the good things on your customers' tenants. Because realistically, your customers are global admins, and you don't want them breaking the policies you've spent 2 months building for them. Even if it's only taking you 10 minutes to deploy them with Tenant Manager, you've still spent months carefully building those policies out. Or if you really want, you can use our templates. So if you don't know how to get started with Intune, please don't just throw in the security baselines because they're horrible. I would not suggest doing just straight CIS level 1 because autopilot will break. Maybe do something that works. And we have our own benchmarks in there that you can deploy. 10 minutes later, you have a working tenant. You can then compare it to CIS, which should match because that's what it does. And you can drift monitor. So if something changes in the tenant, if they go and say, you know what, that MFA pop-up every time I log in is really annoying me, I'll just turn that off. You know, what's the worst that can happen? You can spot that and turn it back on again. Because we all know that customers may not always do what's best for cybersecurity. Sometimes they do what's best for them. And as an MSP, it's your job to keep them right. If they get breached, they're not going to put their hands up and say, I shouldn't have turned that policy off. They're going to come shouting at you and say, why do you not stop this from happening? And we are there. We are your insurance. We're your comfort blanket. Backups, restores, drift check, all in there.
Right, so we've covered configuration, security, compliance, and operations, but there's one big piece of the puzzle that we haven't touched, which is applications and patching. Tenant Manager integrates Robopack directly into the platform. So Robopack handles third-party application deployment and patching across all of your managed tenants. So the pain of finding install commands, testing new versions, rolling out updates, that's all taken care of as well. Application control becomes part of your structured service delivery model, not a separate workflow. And for MSPs, that's huge. You're not just keeping configuration consistent, you're keeping applications patched and up to date across every customer from one place. No additional systems to manage, it's all in the same platform.
So, Dean, let's see a demo.
All right, let's do it. So first we'll demo Robopack and then I'll jump into Tenant Manager. So let me just share my screen. All right, so one of the best bits about Robopack is that it's completely natively multi-tenant, which means that when we go into settings and then down to tenants, you can see I can add as many tenants as I need to in order to manage them. When we look at the list of Intune tenants we've got here, you can see I've got my first coffee customer tenant, my Robopack MSP tenant, and my test tenant for my MSP. Now, in this example, we've only got a few devices in each of those tenants, but in real examples, when we have multiple customers with MSPs, you're going to have a load of information right here. If we scroll down a little bit, you can see that for each of these tenants, we can also assign permissions so that people within the MSP organization can have different levels of access to different tenants that you manage for your customers. So you could give, for example, read-only permission to a certain group and then full write permission to another group. Really, really granular permissions we can do here. Once we're all up and running with having the tenants connected to Robopack, which is really as simple as just clicking on connect tenant and then logging in with the global administrator or the cloud app administrator to create the enterprise application that we need to have permission in those tenants, the service principal, then it's really simple to just head back over to here and choose Radar. And within Radar, we get to choose the tenant that we're going to look at. Now, when I said look at, we actually get to see within each of those tenants which applications are kind of in that tenant. Now, they're in the tenant either because they are an Intune app that has been deployed via Intune or created within Intune, or we have an app that is shown because it's discovered. Now in this main RoboPack demo tenant here, I've got only apps that are Intune apps. So these are created within Intune, and they're an app that I could see if I went into Intune. But if I head over to my other tenant, my dev tenant, you can see that I've got Intune apps. They are apps that are created in Intune but not being patched by RoboPack currently. And then we also have discovered apps. These are apps that are discovered by Intune running the scan on enrolled devices, but they're not managed by RoboPack. So they're not in Intune, they're just discovered by Intune, kind of looking at the device and seeing what apps are installed on there. Now, the goal for an MSP that's using RoboPack to manage applications for customers is to select the applications that you care about or they care about and to patch them effectively. And not just patch them now, but patch them every time a new version gets released. And I can do that either by selecting Add Patch Flow over here, or the more common way we see enterprises and MSPs using Radar for patching is to create a patch group. And if I just scroll back up to the top here, you can see I can create a patch group. I'm going to call it Intune for MSP patch group. And here we can specify how this group manages application patching. So I'm going to add my first wave. And the first wave is going to be for my, well, I'm going to call it the IT pilot group. So I've just searched through Entra, and you can see in this Entra group here, I can add that group. I also want to specify that actually I want 100% success before I move on. So of the 60% that receive the application at first, we want 100% success of those 60%. And then next, I'm going to add a second wave, and that second wave is going to be my all devices. So in this example, I'm going to be deploying to my IT pilot computers for my MSP tenant, and then my second wave is going to be deploying to all devices in my MSP tenant. So from here, I'm now at a stage where I have none of my customers in this environment at all, and I'm just going to be deploying to my MSP tenant. But let's say actually I want to add my customers in here. So maybe after I'm finished with the testing, not only do I want to deploy it to my devices, I want to deploy it to my customer devices as well. So here I go back to existing group, and I choose my customer tenant like this. And from here, I can add all devices. Fantastic. I'll add one group to the wave, and there we go. So now we have this being deployed in parallel. We're going to be deploying to all devices in my MSP tenant and all devices in my customer tenant. Now there is no limit to the number of tenants you can add in wave 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no limit to the number of tenants you can have here at all. And there's no limit to the number of waves you can have. So if in fact you wanted to be deploying to like a few groups in wave 2 and then more groups in wave 3, you can make this as complicated as you like to get exactly what you need for your customers. Now you might find that there are some applications that need to be deployed to specific groups, and therefore, just have a separate patch group for those customers who need specific groups. But the idea is to patch these together, to group them together in a way that you can patch them at the same time and keep that configuration as simple as possible. Just leverage that native multi-tenant capability within RoboPack. All we need to do is just save this patch group. And now that we've saved it, we can add the instant apps by going to Add Instant App, or we can go over to Import Apps with Radar. And if we do that and head over to my customer tenant like I showed you before, we can go down and choose the applications that we want to deploy to all of my customer tenants. So for example, these ones would be great. I can add Edge, OneDrive, Teams, and add those 6 apps. Intune for MSPs patch group, and just choose Add 6 apps. And in a few seconds, those apps are ready to deploy in the patch group flows that I just showed you earlier on. If I go to the patch group now, you can see that it's actually going to be deploying these 6 apps to the IT pilot computers in my RoboPack MSP tenant. And then wave 2, once it's finished, it's going to deploy all of those apps to all devices in 2 of my tenants. Now, as I said earlier on, you can have as many tenants in this wave system as you like so that you can cover all of the different customers that you've got. Now, one of the other things that MSPs love with Robopack is that when we go into app settings, if you have an app that needs to be customized a little bit more than the standard you would normally do, you can go into Add App Setting. And with Add App Setting, we can go and choose maybe an application like the Global Secure Access Client, which many MSPs need to deploy to help customers connect to on-premises resources, for example, right? So what we can do with the Global Secure Access Client, for example, is make some installer customizations. Let's say we want to add a parameter, and the parameter might be VPN-server, let me type that correctly, VPN-server equals 172.16.19.20, for example. And that might be the VPN that we've got for this particular application, for this particular customer. Now, there could be other examples. So, for example, maybe each customer that we're deploying this app to needs a different VPN server. That's really, really common. If I remove that, for example, let's go back to the top. You can see I've got all tenants. All of these settings here are applicable to all tenants that install this application. How about I click the plus? And when I do that, you can see I can add a tenant, and I can click a plus again and add another tenant. And what we've got here is different tenants with different settings. So you can imagine that my Robopack normal MSP tenant, for example, might need this VPN. And then if I go back to up here and choose the different tab for the customer tenant, I can choose a different VPN parameter. So here I can type a different thing, maybe use VPN server on 21 instead. So I've made a change to how this installer works, but maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe I can't just change the installer string. I actually need to do something like add a registry value, and here I can do that. Now remember, all of these changes that I'm going to be able to make, I can just add a registry value here, but it's going to apply differently for different tenants. So I could apply one setting here for the customer tenant and have a different setting here for a different customer. Very, very powerful. If I scroll down a bit more, you can see I can actually add a file. So I can add multiple files wherever I want on the desktops or on the computer. If we go into machine here, you can see I've got the whole disk of where I can put stuff, or I can just put it anywhere from the drive route, which means that I can really put files anywhere on this computer that when it gets deployed on a per customer, per tenant, per application basis. It's so powerful for MSPs who need that really strong customization for all the customers they manage. When I scroll down a bit further, we've got the PowerShell commands. If we want to just make a change that is just not covered by registry keys or files or installer customizations, we can add a PowerShell command. Anything you like can be written here, so you can do that on a per tenant basis per application. I'm going to click delete on that and scroll to the top. I'm just going to go for save settings, and that's going to create an app package for this customer, for the Robopack customer, for the Robopack MSP tenant, and for my customer tenant. And it's going to create that Intune win file that we need to deploy those applications to each of those tenants. So powerful when you consider how much customization MSPs need to do in each of those packages that they create for customers. It's all possible to do with just a few clicks in Robopack. And finally, I think the thing that MSPs really love about Robopack the most is simply the size of the catalog. There are 30,000 apps in the catalog ready to deploy, ready to customize using these app settings that I just showed you. And all of these apps are pre-tested in virtual machines using Robopack hardware, ready to go. All right, that's all I want to show you for Robopack. I think I've covered some of the most important bits for MSPs, but in a little while, we're going to announce something that could be truly transformational when it comes to using Robopack and Tenant Manager for MSPs. On the subject of Tenant Manager, let me just jump in and show you a little bit more about what Tenant Manager is. I'm just going to switch over to a different tenant. All right, so just jumping over into my Tenant Manager environment. What I want to show you is just the core things about Tenant Manager that make MSPs' lives so much easier. Firstly, we have a quick dashboard that will show you all of the really important information for the single tenant that I've chosen for now. And if you go back, you can choose them from the multiple tenants that you have within Tenant Manager, because obviously Tenant Manager is fully natively multi-tenant, built as a multi-tenant application. What we can do here is see exactly what's happening in this particular customer tenant. You can see that we have some drift from the backup, we have some global gold drift, so we have a backup that was marked as gold, so we don't want to really stray too far from that, and we want to be notifying when there's a drift from that. And then we also have drift from the CIS, so that secure baseline we've chosen to align with is CIS here. And what we've done is you can see we've actually drifted from that, and we can figure out exactly how we've drifted and why. We also see that there was a recent backup which is set as OK, which means that the backup was successful. And if we head over to the backup tab up here, you can see we have the backups listed here. And from here we can just click on those, jump into each of those backups and see the policies and items that were backed up. Just heading back out of that section, we have another tab at the top here, which is devices, and the devices blade. You can see we've got a list of all of the devices within the environment, along with their platform, their OS version, the compliance, the last sync time, really powerful information that MSPs need for each of those tenants. Heading over to apps, you can see each of the applications that are in each of those tenants. So here I've got one page of applications because this is a very small customer tenant, but we have all the applications listed here that are there. And you can see on this Adobe Acrobat Reader DC line, we have 83% of devices, of the 10 devices in this organization, have failed to install the app, and actually only 2 have installed it successfully. Very useful information to see right at your fingertips. Heading over to policies, you get to list all the policies that are in the environment and the percentage of success and errors and conflicts within each of these policies. Heading back over to the dashboard here, which shows you the total number of applications, managed devices, total backups, compliant devices, all in one helpful single view. We get to see the total number of devices by platform as well, and also a really easy view of compliant versus non-compliant devices. Now this is all very useful, but one of the most powerful features of Tenant Manager is being able to monitor and react to drift. So drift is when a policy is created or changed or removed from a tenant that already has a specific set of policies that you've created. So let's say you have a specific set of policies that you've configured for a particular customer. You really want to know if someone goes in and changes those policies at all. Your customers typically have full admin into the environments that you're managing, which means that they can go in and change anything at any point. It's really, really useful to be able to see when those changes are made, even if you didn't make them. Let me give you an example. I'm going to take a look at the global gold drift for this particular tenant. And what that gives me access to is the list of changes that have been made since this tenant was marked as gold. So when I click on one of the policies, for example, settings here, I get to see the live data. We only have one shown here at the top because this is a new policy. There's no existing policy that's been changed, but you can see that we have block user content for risky apps is set to true now, and enable admin consent requests has been set to false. So that's a new policy that's been put into the tenant. When I scroll down a bit more, you can see we've got some password rule settings that have been changed. So for example, in the backup that we had for this particular tenant, we had this set of settings present on that particular backup, and you can see I've got a banned password list here of 123456, 1234567889, QWERTY, password. All of these were banned passwords in that banned password list. And over on the right hand side here, you can see that banned password list has now got a null value. That means that the banned password list has been completely emptied since this last backup was taken. That's pretty significant drift that's just happened there. Someone can now use a banned password or a potentially risky password in their environment, and we are not going to be able to stop it because we've removed that particular setting. This is really useful information that we've got right at our fingertips, and actually if we don't like that change that has happened, we can push this policy back to how it was with the backup data. Incredibly useful for MSPs to be able to see those changes that are being made on these tenants without actually having to go into each of those tenants separately. Now remember, the point of this is that I'm able to do all of this without having access directly to my customer's tenant, because I'm using the service principle, which means that you can give access to this data and this information to anyone within the organization who needs it with full role-based access control. and they don't need that level of permission within the customer tenant. So really, really powerful to be able to allow your junior engineers to have read access to some customer information, for example, and to allow senior engineers level 2, level 3 access to much more powerful information and much more powerful actions within that tenant without needing to change that access on the customer side. Really, really powerful. If we extend the menu on the left-hand side here, you can see we've got access to another blade here, which is called reporting. Reporting is incredibly useful for MSPs because we extend that reporting that Intune has for each of those customers and make it accessible as a central place. When I choose here, I can choose the tenant, and you can create these reports across multiple tenants and get that information without having to jump into different portals for different customers. For example, we have the general reports here, so license count. We have security, so admins without MFA, that kind of thing. Compliance, so device, non-compliant devices. I can just choose create report, and it builds that report for me completely a la carte. Very, very useful. What I can also do is actually go and choose pre-selected reports and get pre-built reports for all these different settings. And there's much more coming when it comes to pre-selected reports, but these are just the ones that we've got in this particular version that I'm using right now. In a little while, we're going to be talking about something that would allow you to get up and running with this with very, very little effort and get you onboarding customers within just a few minutes. Now, it's all well and good onboarding all of your customers to Tenant Manager and having access to all this rich data about drift and all the backups and that kind of thing. But what about actually getting policies out to new tenants in the first place? What if your customer hasn't used Intune before and you want to get set up with a new tenant for that customer? In our experience, building a customer tenant with the right set of policies that are just going to get people up and running and secure as quickly as possible, that can take hours to days to weeks, depending on the customer. What we have within Tenant Manager is the ability to create and deploy templates across multiple customers. So let's say you have a particular way of deploying one of your customers. You've just got them set up by creating all those policies. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could just back all those up into a template and deploy that across multiple customers as you onboard them? Completely customized to exactly how you want those customers to be. That's simply not something that Intune does natively, but it is something that we have within Tenant Manager. When I click on templates, you can see we can simply create a new template based on either a backup or a gold tenant that you've already got. So maybe you've got a tenant that you've just set up and is exactly as you want it. It's like a fresh example environment that you want to use as your base for new customers. Select that from the gold tenant list here and choose the types of policies, so Intune or Entra, and all of those policies will be moved into a template that you can deploy across multiple customers. It's just so incredibly powerful, and it allows you to get up and running with a new tenant for a new customer within minutes rather than days. So that's Tenant Manager, one platform that brings together standardization, security, compliance, backup, device management, and application patching for MSPs managing Intune at scale. Now, today's session was all about giving you the blueprint, the technical picture, the business case, whatever you want to call it, and how this fits into your service delivery. But that doesn't actually get the stuff done. And that's what comes next. We're launching a pilot of our Software Central Academy. And to kick things off, we're running private implementation clinics, which are hands-on, instructor-led sessions. And these are small groups, not massive conference hall things. This will be a live Q&A with troubleshooting, and the key bit is that it's hands-on. You turn up with your actual tenant, whether that's test or prod, and we'll help you get onboarded and configured and running in Tenant Manager. So real tenants, real problems, real solutions, not a sandbox and not a demo. We also are doing a bit of a licensing thing as well here, aren't we, Andrew? What will it cost to jump into this with Tenant Manager?
We are giving everyone who signs up for this a 60-day free trial, so they can go through the entire thing and test it out, and then at the end, hopefully they'll love it enough to keep on.
Awesome.
Any limitations on the trial, or is it a
Nothing at all.
use?
It's a fully featured 60-day trial.
Nice.
And that includes RoboPack, I assume?
That includes RoboPack, yes, both.
Awesome. So I mentioned this is a hands-on implementation clinic that is going to be small groups, and for that reason places are limited because we want these to be genuinely useful and not just a crowded room where you can't get hands-on time. or speak to the instructor. So if you want in, just click the sign up link that is in the description, and we'll include it in the follow-up email if you registered for this webinar. Register your interest and we'll get you into the next available cohort. If you walked away from this today thinking this would actually solve a lot of our problems, then this clinic is where you can actually make that happen. That's it from us today. If you've dropped questions in this chat, thank you so much. Last reminder, if you want to take what we've talked about today and actually make it happen, sign up for the implementation clinic. That's the hands-on session where we'll actually take your tenants and build it together. The link is in the description below. Thanks to Andrew, Harjit, Nicklas, and Steve for joining. And thanks to everyone for watching. We'll see you in a few days if you sign up. Cheers.